Okay, we're recording. Denise, are you good? Yvette, did we lose Denise?
Denise, you're muted.
Denise, you're muted, I believe.
I started talking and it was
Thank
on
you,
mute.
Erin.
We've all been there, right? So maximizing your pay through effective negotiation. I started teaching this class about 4 years ago because I was concerned that people didn't know what was happening behind the scenes when they were negotiating for a pay raise, whether it be in-house because they thought they needed a market adjustment, or they were negotiating a pay raise as a new hire. My background is unique in that I have been inside many different types of companies. I do a variety of different things in my practice. One is I work with employers and I do a lot of comp projects with them to make sure that they're paying their employees appropriately and competitively. And I do that across a variety of industries, typically small and mid-sized firms, but I'm also a career and pay negotiation coach. So I like to help people get paid what they're worth, and I'm a speaker and trainer. Today, we're going to talk about these 6 things to maximize your pay throughout the course of your life. You have the right mindset. You need to be great at networking. And for those of you who are introverts, that may be a bit of a challenge. And especially for all of us who are living in a virtual world, that can be a very big challenge, but I'll give you some tips and tricks in that space. You have to know how to negotiate. So I'll give you a framework in that space. You have to know what you are worth and your value proposition and how to communicate that effectively. It also takes self-awareness and emotional intelligence in order to influence the right parties to give you the right pay increases at the right time. And you have to be willing to have difficult conversations. So let's talk about mindset. I think there's a big difference between having an abundance versus having a scarcity mindset. And I am curious, when I say those words relates to pay, what do you guys think of when I talk about an abundance mindset related to money? You can either respond by taking yourself off of mute, or you could respond in the chat. What does an abundance mindset mean to you as it relates to money?
I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead.
It means freedom, I think.
Yeah.
Just freedom to act as you want. I mean, be yourself.
Yeah, it does. When you have the right dollars in the bank account, you have more freedom, certainly. What else?
I think having a mindset around it is like kind of having the belief that you will have enough rather than the belief that you won't have enough.
Yep. I was tested on this, Erin, thanks. I was tested on this just in my business here this week. This last week, there was a big project for a company out in Germany I had bid on and didn't get the project. And I have one-on-ones with my team every Monday morning. And as I was talking to my team about the work I didn't have to allocate to them, which means, you know, they aren't getting paid as much as they were hoping, right? Because they work on an hourly rate. It was an interesting conversation. And I said, you know what, here's my belief. I believe because that one didn't come in, a better one's going to come in. And so I have a strong belief that if something that I wanted didn't appear in my life when I thought it needed to, that's okay. Something better is going to come along. And I've had that proven over and over again. A scarcity mindset on the other side of the fence would be, oh no, what am I going to do? I don't have that business coming in, and I'm scared and I'm afraid and I don't know how the next one's going to come in. So that's how it relates to for me. For those of you who are in the workplace working for somebody else, it could have a whole different approach, right? And I'll give you an example. When you work for leaders who have a scarcity mindset, it feels very different. There's often a lack of trust, there's cost control and very micromanagement types of behaviors occurring in the workplace. When you're in a space in the workplace where there is an abundance mindset, it's win-win, it's more positive, there's a focus on results, less of a focus on control, more of a how do we drive the right outcomes for our clients, etc. So it's a very different space. Chelle, do you have anything to add to this? Because I know you've experienced this in a wide variety of settings.
Muted, Shelley.
Shelley, you muted.
Okay, Denise and I are experiencing the Mondays for sure. Thank you,
Yeah.
Amberish and Aaron. So it really is about thinking through, if you are in a job search right now, it is not forever. And even though the market is saturated with potential candidates, is you have abundance by having Denise present to you today, and gratitude by being able to link in with each other, and just so grateful for all of the free resources that are out there. That's not scarcity. That really is abundance for you. And I specifically believe that there's enough abundance for everyone to go around. And that's really the focus of Denise and I speaking with you today. So those are my thoughts on it, Denise.
Great. And we've talked a little bit about this. What does it sound like if you're an entrepreneur? What does it sound like if you're in a job search? I firmly believe the other aspect to earning what you're worth is your network. Your network is your net worth, and it can be hard as an adult to make friends sometimes. I don't encourage you to go put a handcuff on yourself with somebody else and ask them if they want to hang out. I do encourage you to think about how are you going to make friends? I think networking kind of leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths because it can feel very transactional. I can remember the time before COVID hit where I would go to networking events and people would pass business cards, and I would, put them in a pile when I came back home to my office, and I knew those people weren't going to reach out to me. But every once in a while, I was surprised. I'd have one or two people who would reach out to me, and we'd actually develop a friendship and a relationship. And I took an influence class many years ago from a gentleman named Scott Halford here in Colorado. And Scott asked this question. And he said he often reflects on his day by asking himself this question: were they made better for having been in your presence? That means that your presence is a gift to that other party. So I would encourage you to think about, how are you adding value in just small moments to people, whether it be online or whether it be via a LinkedIn connection. Maybe you send somebody an article that might be of interest to them because of something that they're going through, either personally or professionally. But adding value is the way you develop relationships, and that is a direct reflection of how you are going to earn money. I also think you have to make it easy for people to stay in touch. And I discovered this app, Hi Hello, a few months ago now. It took me less than 30 minutes to set up a digital business card. And I was doing this because I was cleaning out my office and I found all these paper business cards. And I'm like, I don't even use these anymore. I wonder if there's a way to do the same thing digitally. I don't think I'll be reordering paper business cards ever again. If you take your phone and pull up your camera and you scan that QR code to the right on this slide, you will get what you see in the middle, which is my digital business card. I would encourage those of you who are in a job search or who are just looking to network to develop something like this. At the bottom, you will see my paragraph that I ask people to use when they introduce me to other people. And you will also see a link so you can schedule a meeting with me. Each one of you, because I know the topic of compensation is something that sometimes people don't want to bring up in a group setting, gets free 15 minutes with me. And oftentimes when I get done with doing a webinar like this one, I will have my calendar filled up with a lot of 15-minute strategy calls that people will schedule with me. So I encourage you to do that so that we can talk, you can get to know me and I can get to know you a little bit. Effective negotiation takes a number of different skills. I am curious, when I ask you guys to think about the term negotiation, what kind of things come to mind? Do you like negotiating?
I don't know how to. I just
Yeah?
say, yeah, I mean, I'll say what I have to say, but I don't even know if I'm doing it right. It's one of those things that's so amorphous in my opinion. I just don't know how to, like, some people feel very sure and I'm like, it sounds good enough to me. I'm not a,
It's something that a lot of people aren't very confident in. So I appreciate your comment. And it's one thing that I am determined to change in the world of work. I think we have to get used to negotiating and asking for things. The reality is we negotiate every day. We just don't call it negotiation. So I'll give you an example. I negotiate with my kids on who's going to take up the trash, who's going to empty the dishwasher, who's going to throw in the next load of laundry. I negotiate with my dog sometimes as it relates to his pulling when we go on a walk. So I think we negotiate a lot. But the other thing I would encourage you to think about is what are some characteristics of good negotiators? And I'm sure you guys have run into people who you think are like, wow, this person's really great at negotiation. What are those characteristics that come to mind?
One thing that I think has been really effective for me is not approaching it as a zero-sum game, is really trying to approach conversations about negotiating as from a more of a win-win perspective. I feel like that's a whole lot of business jargon, which makes me feel slightly ill, but it really does work to say like transparency. If I'm a high value employee currently or prospectively, transparency into what my priorities are and what's important to me, and it's a relationship. So they want me to continue working there and I want them to have the opportunity to retain me.
Yeah, exactly. You should be finding win-win situations as you're going through a negotiation. And for many of you, as you negotiate, for instance, as a new hire, that's the start of a relationship, right? So you want to make it a good start to relationship. Good negotiators, in my opinion, leave very little to chance. They are very good at planning. And I'll give you guys a list of planning questions today as we get deeper into this presentation. Good negotiators plan and think about what are they going to offer and why, what's important to them. They're very curious. They're very patient. They are flexible. They show empathy. I think empathy is a superpower when it comes to negotiating. They also manage their emotions very effectively. They don't get emotionally hijacked by their amygdala in their brain when it comes to certain aspects of negotiation. One of the first things I would encourage you to do is to know what you're worth. And that requires that you go out to data and do research. And so this is a list of valid, good resources that are free on the internet where you can find out what is your job that you're performing worth. Now, what are you worth within that pay range that you might find for the job is a different story, but these are some strong data sources. I'm curious, have any of you used any of these? And if you have, which ones have you used?
Well, I've had employees use them, but I always find a lot of these like salary.com, and they're beefed up a little. The numbers are beefed up a little bit, in my opinion.
I would tell you salary.com comes in higher than some of the other data sources. They do purchase data. What you have access to that is free is heavily influenced by Fortune 100 firms. I would grant you that. I have access to data from salary.com that I actually purchased. So I use that with my clients to be a little bit more nuanced. And so it's a little bit more finely attuned to industry revenue or full-time equivalent employee size and location when I work with my clients. Glassdoor, PayScale, LinkedIn, those are data sets that are developed because of crowdsourcing. So you have to provide data in order for them to have data to give back to you. Indeed is an aggregator site that gives you lots of job openings. And for anybody who is located here in Colorado, we have a new law here called the Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act that went into effect on January 1st of this year. And so every job that is eligible to be filled by somebody in the state of Colorado needs to have a pay range associated with it on the job posting. So that's giving people much more insight than they had prior to the first of this year. But Bureau of Labor Statistics, Comparably, and all these others are good sources as well.
Yeah, but one of the things I've noticed on that is when they put in the salary range, it's like for like I said, director level, let's say, or whatever, it's like the low is 87 and the high is 190. I mean, how, like how broad can you get, right?
There is a great deal of variability. I would tell you to pick the median or the middle of the market from these data sets and then do a summary like this. Find a couple different data sources that you like, match the same job, and you should be able to develop a pay range around the average, plus or minus 10%. You should be in the ballpark of what's competitive. There are very few companies that target more than the median of the market, but this is a good approach to kind of get rid of some of that variability. Have any of you done a spreadsheet like this?
Hey, Denise. I want to just honor one of the questions we have in the chat. It's from Lisa. She wants to know, how do you get leaders to move away from the scarcity mindset on top of them to keep changing the parameters of the job, requiring you to do more without a pay raise continually. So what recommendations would you say to get leaders out of that scarcity mindset?
So I think there's another question in there that you maybe haven't asked. So to get out of a scarcity mindset, the company needs to reward abundance mindset, not scarcity. So you get in a company culture what you reward and what you tolerate, right? So if you are working for an employer that rewards someone for having a scarcity mindset, that's how they're going to show up. So you can influence that to some extent, but the reward system and some things are beyond your control. If you are getting additional work over time and you aren't getting pay increases because the company's taking advantage of you, and some companies do, some companies don't, you can articulate an argument to employers and say, you know, when I was hired, here was my job description. This is what I'm doing today. And I will often do this with my clients who want help having those difficult conversations and I'll write scripts and I'll help them write the job description and do the market pricing off of the data set that I purchase. And then I'll help them have the conversation about getting a promotion or at least getting a market adjustment in alignment with the increase in pay and job responsibilities. So you can influence that, but it is a bit of a nuanced conversation. If I haven't fully answered your question, you may want to put that 15 minutes on my calendar so we can have a more in-depth conversation.
So
Anything
Denise,
else?
I think that's really awesome what you were talking about. And I know that you've been really successful doing that for a lot of people. And it's absolutely something that you and I have talked about that I also do with my clients. So I want to go back to what Alan was saying, that I have heard from a lot of people that salary.com can be beefed up a little bit. So I appreciate your insights on the crowdsourcing, and from an insider perspective, from the head of talent, being the head of talent, this is exactly how, when I left corporate, that I figured out my own range. Is I looked at different salary market wage assessments, but then I also asked other people in the companies about that. So do you have any comments on like that networking piece, and if people know people inside corporations or even in government, finding out about that?
Well, first of all, government, I'll back up. Government publishes, like you can go into a government and find out what they're paying because it's taxpayer dollars. So you can find out what government entities are paying. So if anybody's looking for that data, let me know and I'm happy to share that with you or help you Google it. I do think that you have to recognize that the data you guys have access to that is free on the internet is different than what happens in-house. Having been a compensation leader in a variety of different industries, I had budgets of over $100,000 where I would purchase data on which to base the pay ranges that I was going to pay our employees on. So there is a little bit of a difference in data, but the important thing is having the conversation. And I'm going to jump to the next slide because it is one thing to look in the data sets that you have access to that's free or that I have access to that I pay for. What is the job worth? The secondary piece of that is what are you worth in that job? And this is about how you talk about yourself, how you show up, how you tell your value story. When I was teaching HR leaders and recruiters how to develop pay offers for folks, this is what I utilize. You know, you're going to pay somebody lower in the range if they're learning the job. You're going to pay them in the middle of the range if they're fully proficient. And if they're role modeling and doing above and beyond work consistently over time, then you're going to pay higher in the range. So I would encourage you to not just think of those data sources as what are you worth? It's about what is the job worth? And then you have to articulate your value so that you can get paid high enough in the range. There are also other factors that are impacting those data sets you guys have access to, right? So if somebody, if you're looking at data and you can't get at what geography differences there are, Denver pays differently where Chelle and I are located than say somebody in Grand Junction for the same job. Small startup companies pay differently than large Fortune 500, Fortune 100 firms. Industries pay differently. If you are in a role where there are hundreds of other people who can do the same work as you, guess what? Your pay isn't going to be as high as somebody where there's only 3 people in the world who can do that type of job. And then obviously your performance stories and how you articulate your value makes a difference as well. Any comments or questions on this?
Denise, I just wanted to share a personal experience with what you were talking about in asking for an adjustment for increased role responsibilities.
Great.
And specifically getting back to your comment also about good negotiation and kind of how people show up. I had that exact conversation. I had started in a role that was new. I was the first person doing it. And because of my experience, was able to contribute way above what the original job description had been, partially because they were writing it for a new role and they didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. And when I went to my boss and my boss's boss, I think I ended up having a really good experience and got a substantial pay increase. I think that probably would have gone differently if I had shown up with the attitude that they were taking advantage of me. But to your point, I didn't. I just kind of said, I understand this is a new role. The job description was the best guess you had at the time. It probably was also very dependent on who you got into the role. You got me. Here's my experience. Here's the wins I've contributed to our team in the last year. And here's why I think that means that my value is above and beyond what the original job description and salary range was. And it worked out really well for me. But I do think if I had walked into that room and kind of had a chip on my shoulder of like, I do so much and you don't recognize me, I don't think I would have gotten the end result that I got.
Attitude matters a lot in these conversations. And I have to be honest, there are a lot of times I'll talk to people and they'll vent. And I'm like, I'm a pretty safe person to vent to because I've heard and seen so much. It's important to get all those big feelings and emotions out and vent. And, it's okay to feel taken advantage of. There are companies that do that. But when you are showing up and asking for more, there is a sequence to how you ask that really matters. I'm going to jump into that a little bit more deeper into the conversation. For those of you who may have a side gig or maybe thinking about doing some consulting work, I have a couple slides in here on this because I get asked this question a lot by folks who want help making more money from an entrepreneurial or freelance perspective. So this is one approach to setting a consulting rate. You can, go to those same data sources and figure out what is a target annual salary, figure out what are your expenses for the year, and then have an adjusted annual salary. The next step is to figure out how many hours a year are you going to work, and then divide, and then you get an hourly rate. Now that's a pretty involved process because you got to figure out your expenses. A more streamlined approach is just a percent markup, right? So if you're new, you might do a 30% markup. If you're really well established and you have some unique niche and you're established from a brand and value perspective over a period of years, you may be able to do a deeper markup. But even though I'm showing you as a consultant or as a coach or as a freelancer how you could do hourly rates, I do not recommend you bid for work based on hourly rates. I think you should do it based on project-based pricing. And Alan Weiss wrote a great book called $1 Million Consulting that I would encourage you each to read if you're interested in doing some sort of consulting work or freelance work. I think he does a good job of outlining how to develop an RFP or how to respond to RFPs, how to write proposals, and how to do project deliverable pricing based on the value you deliver. You're going to need an hourly rate. So that's why I gave you those other 2 slides to get to this. But this is a good primer in this type of pricing to get what you're paid, to get
Denise,
paid in that space. Yeah.
We have a question from the chat from Amir. How risky is it to negotiate a salary in current situation of high unemployment? Will there be a chance that the employer might pass and move on to the second candidate?
So I can tell you, I've been doing this work for a number of years, and I have only had 2 instances where I've had somebody tell me an offer got pulled because they negotiated. Now, if you are in the process of negotiating an offer and somebody pulls it because you asked for more, that tells you something about that company's culture. And I would question, for most of us, why would you want to work for a company that has no tolerance for dialogue around pay and for asking for more? I I think asking for more should be expected. And I always expected it when I would work with my recruiters and talent acquisition teams when I was in-house in big companies. I always said, start here. If they give you a performance story or result story that's like this, you can go up to this amount. And then I give them some room to negotiate with candidates. So I don't think it's bad to negotiate, but so I wouldn't worry too much about that. If an offer gets pulled, have an abundance mindset and know that the next thing that's coming up is probably going to be better.
Denise, I actually really agree with you there. And that is why we wanted to provide this on pay, because a lot of times candidates just have this inner critic. It's like, I can't ask for pay. And it really is about that mindset. I also wanted to agree with you that as the head of talent for Comcast and Lockheed, we partnered with compensation experts just like you, and recruiters at companies are trained to have that negotiation conversation. And in larger companies, there are compensation structures, just like Denise is talking with you about. And absolutely, no matter what, have the internal fortitude to negotiate. Everything is about a negotiation, not just base salary, but total compensation as well. And Denise, I love this next slide of yours about your branding statement. And for those people who are on the phone that work with me, that you will know that what I teach you is actually well known. So
yeah, this is Chelle and I met at Lehigh Harrison when I was doing a workshop and she was leaving her company, and I would tell you, your negotiation doesn't start at the point you get an offer when you're a new hire. Your negotiation actually starts when you are interacting and starting to have conversations, both written as well as verbal, with your potential new employer. So you have to have an elevator pitch, a branding statement where you're talking about what makes you wow, what makes you awesome. And so this is the format I like to use. You also need to have source stories, and these are your accomplishment stories. And so this is a simple framework. I have people who are frustrated with me sometimes, and they're like, these are really hard to write. They are. However, these are your value statements. These are your results statements in your stories. Incredibly important as it relates to answering interview questions, networking. Two big questions, other contextual point. If you don't know how to tell source stories in the context of what a company cares about, their biggest goals, those obstacles to reaching those goals, it will not matter how much you ask for. This is the structure I use with my clients. You never, ever, ever talk about pay or non-cash rewards without talking about your results and what the employer cares about. If you connect all three of these components in your conversation with an HR or a business leader, you're likely to come out on the other side very happy. If you do not, and you just show up talking about pay, or you show up with the wrong attitude, like Erin mentioned earlier, it's not going to go well, and you're not going to get what you want.
mm-hmm.
There are lots of options when it comes to offer negotiation. There's base pay, there's bonus or sales incentives, there's stock or cash long-term incentives. I think for those of you who may be in the space of earning those things, that's one of my superpowers in terms of how I help my clients talk about those kinds of things. But there are also a plethora of other things you can ask for. You can ask for more paid time off. You can change your job title and responsibilities sometimes in the course of a negotiation. Start dates, relocation, eligibility for certain things. There are certain things you can't ask for more of, like changes in health benefits sometimes are very regulated, as are stock programs. Pension programs, 401k programs are governed by ERISA. You can't change those things, but there are sometimes components of pay and non-cash types of things that you can negotiate for. I've helped people with termination provisions. I've helped people with get college tuition and scholarships for their kids. I've helped people. I've got one client right now who I helped negotiate his new hire, but now he wants a promotion to VP. I'm helping him develop the business case and the PowerPoint presentation in order to talk about getting a promotion. And that means not just his pay, but it's a 2-3 level conversation with the CEO and COO in that he needs to build out his team because he sees some opportunities to provide value to the business. So I like working with people who think about themselves as value drivers, and I like helping them tell their story so that they can get one or more of these things. But you can't go at it by talking about it from a position-based negotiation perspective, which means position A, position B, and then find a settlement range. That's not how to go about negotiating. I am all about interest-based negotiation, which is about, you might come out of the gate with sharing your position, but then it's about a dialogue and conversation about what are your interests, what are your needs, what do we have in common, and finding win-win solutions that work for everybody. Interest-based negotiation feels very different. You're problem solving, you're working together to get to a common goal. It is not about being adversarial and trying to manipulate and play games. I said
We do
lots.
have a few questions in the chat. Okay. The first one would be from John. Speaking of salary range, the recent advice is to shy away from a range, but ask for a total compensation package of X, with X being the higher than what is reasonably expected to receive. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you have to be reasonable, right? Companies have budgets, so you can't be unreasonable in your request, or you're going to get booted and they're going to go on to another candidate. So I think that's the piece that I think both Chelle and I know, having been inside companies, we know how they think about these things. You have to do the research to figure out what is the job worth, and then you have to have the good story about what are you worth in that job and why are you worth that. I do believe that the first person who says a number loses. I much prefer the company or the employer say the number or the range associated with the jobs instead of you coming out of the gate with that. And so I do have certain scripts related to that when I work with clients. Applicant tracking systems are a pain in the butt, right? We all know that when you get into those and you have to put in your past information. Most employers don't ask for salary history anymore because they know it's illegal in most jurisdictions, or many jurisdictions these days. They'll ask for salary expectations, but you got to do the research to have the right salary expectations that you put in an applicant tracking system or an online form. And you have to label the numbers, or at least verbally to label the numbers. Are you talking about only, or total compensation, and total direct compensation, which is another term? So you have to make sure you're talking about the right things as you're talking to hiring managers and recruiters.
Okay.
Anything else in the chat, Chelle?
Yeah, Maria would like to know, can recruiters focus on getting credibility for negotiating at a low range?
Say that again.
Can recruiters focus on getting credibility for negotiating at a low range? Meaning, I think what Maria is asking is, can they be well known inside the companies for landing clients at low in the range, for negotiating lower and saving budgetary dollars for the business to continually bring people in? So they're bringing people in at the lower range.
You know, some companies have that philosophy. They just want to bring you in as low in the range as you'll accept, and they are not very generous. Other companies will come out of the gate and they want to give you a competitive offer right away because they have a long-term viewpoint and an abundance mindset. And they recognize if they don't get the right talent in the door, they don't give them the right work, keep them challenged, and give them the right leadership and other workplace environment components, that they're going to walk and leave. And they don't want pay to be a component that's going to encourage people to leave. So it really depends on the company. This is where I think informational interviewing and sussing out and being kind of a little bit of a PI, private investigator, helps when you're in a job search, where you talk to either people who've left a company recently or who are currently employed, where you have an established relationship, and you talk to them about, tell me about the company, tell me about their comp philosophy, how is pay and performance conversations, how does that go there? I'm just trying to get a sense of how my negotiation as I move further through the job interview process might work. Those types of intel and details that you can get by having a strong network are really important.
Okay, I think that's all we have from the chat right now. So I love this next portion. I absolutely agree with this philosophy. So how should candidates and internal people who want to be promoted plan their negotiation?
So you have to understand your risk tolerance, right? And every time I talk about risk tolerance, I always think, you probably heard that from your financial advisor. There is a risk tolerance to get negotiation as well. And so you might talk yourself out of negotiating. What I would tell you is you have to know your walkaway point. I've worked with a number of clients and this is where an abundance and scarcity mindset come into play, where a company lowballed them in terms of an offer for the type of work and level of work they were going to be contributing. And they walked away. But within weeks after that, because they kept their job search in the foot on the pedal, they kept their momentum, they got a couple job offers, and I helped them compare the job offers, and we negotiated, and they selected the right one. So you have to know a walkaway point, you have to know your goal, you have to know what your stretch goal is, and you have to know what your risk tolerance is. And as you plan your negotiation, you have to know what is important to you and why that's important to you. If you don't know what you're willing to compromise on and what you're not, you're going to walk in and you're going to walk out the other side being very frustrated and upset. I'll give you an example. I typically do 3 to 4 negotiations with clients a week these days. And I've got people popping all over the US in terms of getting offers. The trick is that we spend a lot of time thinking through what is it that you have to offer that is of value. What are those components of an offer? Base pay, bonus or sales incentive, LTI, paid time off, relocation, start date, a variety of different things. And then we think through how are we going to bring forward our request for more in the context of also just understanding the offer. Sometimes you'll get an offer and you'll be like, I don't understand their bonus program or sales incentive. Gosh, there are some companies who create sales incentive plans that are really complex. So you have to understand what you're negotiating as well. And because I've been on the side of the fence where I've designed those types of programs, I have a very efficient way that I ask questions and I help my clients write their scripts and their talking points in emails so that they can get what they need out of the hiring managers or the recruiters. There's also a play between who do you ask for what, right? Like how are you developing a relationship with the recruiter? What does that look like? How much dialogue have you had with the hiring manager? What does that look like? And if you've got another offer coming in from another company, or maybe one that's a little bit out further, how do you hurry that other company up so that you can compare the 2 offers? So these are pretty nuanced conversations. I think empathy is a huge superpower. You will spend a lot of time thinking about your side of the negotiation, but you got to think about the other person on the other side of the negotiation. What is important to them? What do they need to have from you in order to say yes? If they don't have the approval authority to say yes to something that you're asking for, who do they need to talk to outside of the conversation between you two? How do you set them up for success in that other conversation? How do you give them written talking points so that they can negotiate on your behalf? There's all sorts of nuances in these conversations that I can't obviously describe on this phone call or this webinar today, but it's very important to not just think about these questions as it relates to planning, but writing them out, because there's something I think almost magical that happens as you write out what you're willing to compromise on, what you're willing to be flexible on, and you think through negotiation scenarios about how you're going to make trades between what's important to you and what's important to the other party. Comments, questions?
I love that, Denise. Write out what you're willing to compromise on. In the chat, we have put the link to the $1 Million Consulting by Alan Weiss. Thank you, Yvette. There's a question on any tips as to avoid the salary discussion until mutual interest has been established. I find that internal recruiters always start by asking how much someone wants to earn before it is clear that mutual interest exists. So what are your thoughts on that, Denise?
So here's the script I tell people. I appreciate that you want to know what my pay expectations are at this point. However, we've just started the process. I've read the job description and we're just starting to get to know each other, and I'm starting to understand more about what you expect from someone performing this role. I'll understand more about the company and the challenges you guys are facing, as well as my ability to contribute to that as we go along in the process. I'm sure we can come to a mutually agreed upon total compensation package further down the line. Help me out. What is the budget for this job? What's the base salary range? And do you offer an incentive of some sort? And then just shut up, be quiet, and let them talk. Silence is powerful in negotiations. I have often will tell my clients, put yourself on mute, or and when you ask a question, or just like that script I just shared with you guys, put yourself on mute and let silence happen. People will fill in the space because they'll get nervous and they don't like silence. And then just take notes.
Denise, you and I must be like in the same mind at this point. It's absolutely what I tell my clients as well. You have to have the confidence to know what you're worth, speak your truth, not be afraid to have that mindset of abundance, and then say what you're worth and be quiet. So recruiters are absolutely, or should be, versed on this type of conversation. And so maybe as we continue in a bit, you and I can talk about a little bit more of that dance about when they ask you for the salary range.
Yep.
A couple of different questions in here. What if they ask you in the negotiation what other people are paying if you mentioned you were interviewing other places? That's a really great question, Lisa.
Yep, great question. I always say, you know what, those are confidential conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to share who else I'm talking to, but I am excited about who I'm talking to and the roles that they have open right now. And just be quiet. They don't need to know. That's leverage. Don't give away stuff and here's the other thing, and nobody likes to know this, but the world is a small place, and people will call other people and they'll say, hey, Jimmy's interviewing with you. I want him over here because of blah, blah, blah. And they might make a side deal and you might not get an offer from that other company. Don't share that stuff. You don't need to share that. So those are confidential conversations I'm not at liberty to share. Just move on.
I wanted to jump into, as someone who also has been on the HR side and talked to a lot of people. I loved what you said, and I love the perspective of like saying, as we talk more, we'll figure out, I'll know more about what you're looking for in this role. I have had a lot of people who are not, if they're not quite to that level of confidence yet, kind of like pushing back in that way. A kind of pared down approach that I have used and have helped others with is just to frame it as, I know your recruiters have done a lot of work establishing a fair salary range for this. Can you help me out by letting me know what that is? Because,
Love it.
I love your approach of like, if you're feeling really confident, to say, once I know what I think I can contribute and give to you, but not everyone's quite there yet in the conversation. But if you just are okay acknowledging and saying like, I know that a lot of work goes into figuring out fair pay on your end. If you could let me know what the starting point is, we can work from there. And at least at the very least, you're not the first one to say a number then.
Yeah,
so it's like
exactly.
Baseline.
That's great. Thank you, Erin. That's another great approach. Love it. Anybody else?
How acceptable is it to negotiate a job title for an employer?
I think it's very acceptable, especially if the job title isn't a good representation of the work that you're hearing in the interview process. And I'll give you an example. I've lost count of the number of people that I've talked to over the years where they've said, here's the job that was posted, but as I went through the interview process, it was a different job. And I will tell you, on the inside, there are managers who will post a job and they won't even review the job description. And sometimes you will learn through the course of the interview process that the job that they really want to hire is at a higher level, or they will start customizing their expectations for a role just because you're a unique candidate. In which case, then you need to work on writing a job description that accurately reflects what you're hearing in the job interview process that's different than the one that they posted. And then you have a conversation about what does that other job typically pay in the marketplace. And this is where I think my magic comes in as I work with clients, is I help them have those conversations and I pull data so that they can have a good conversation. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're trying to help the employer fill a seat with someone, ideally you, in a role that you can perform at the highest level, at the right pay, And sometimes they just don't do a good job on the front end when they're posting positions. So sometimes it does kind of get squishy and muddy in the middle until you can get out the other side. And then you can negotiate for a different title. I will also say that I have worked with clients where maybe they got brought in as a manager or a director and their goal was to get to VP. And then we've done career planning about how do they go in and prove their worth in the role that they're hired into, but then how do we move the pieces once they're in-house and have proven themselves so they can step into that VP role in 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road.
So I have a recent story about that also, where one of my clients was interviewing for a vice president of HR, and it really was more of a position as a chief people officer. And so part of his negotiation was talking about how does he make that job title change. And it was a very easy conversation with the CEO. They agreed to that. And because they increased his title, he was actually eligible for more equity and overall much, much higher total compensation. So for the person who asked that, absolutely, you can negotiate that. And it takes me back to what Megan Jo Specht, one of our recruiters that presented on Colorado Career Connectors. Job titles are just that. They are, she doesn't even look at people who apply on the ATS because the job title is technical account manager. And she gets a lot of sales people who apply to the role where it's really a sales engineer and software developer that she's looking for. So really make sure you read the job description, and then don't ever be afraid to ask if you perceive that your skill set and competencies or abilities are higher than that, to negotiate the job title as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes when I would work with recruiters in-house, they'd have the ability to go up a job level than what was actually posted. Now, I will tell you from a Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, they can't do that anymore because legally there's issues. But you have the ability to influence a lot more than what you give yourself credit for. I'm going to keep going in the presentation because I want to get through the rest of the slides and still have a little bit more room for questions. And I know, Chelle, you want to do some wrap up at the end of the webinar today. You have to have a personal marketing plan. You can't get to the point where you talk about price and not have already talked about you as the product, placed yourself in a location in terms of a company that will get the best out of you, and then had a good promotional campaign for yourself. If you don't have this lined up, and I'm going to tell you, you shouldn't just have this when you're in a job search process. You should have these things aligned and in process, even when you're happy in a job. We all know situations, whether we've experienced ourselves or we've had a loved one or a colleague experience it, where layoffs happen, mergers, acquisitions happen, new leadership gets brought in, they get rid of the old guard, they bring in new people that they've worked with in the past, and then they clean house. There's all sorts of things that happen that you can't control. These components that I've got on the slide are things you can control. So you need to make sure that you're doing this and keeping things moving forward as it relates to your career. I firmly believe there's a prosperity exchange that happens between employers and employees. And on the right-hand side, you will see a list of bullets. You can use these to create source stories. You can use them to quantify and put things in your resume or your LinkedIn profile. For those of you who are more on the side of the fence of being freelancers or consultants, you have to talk to your clients about buy triggers and things that you're going to sell them, which are outcomes. I don't think that I sell compensation programs to my employer clients. I think I'm selling them ease of being able to bring in the right talent in order to fill the seat so that they can meet their business goals. So you have to talk in the language of whoever you're going to sell to. There are performance superpowers that will impact whether or not you maximize your pay over the course of your career. One of those is emotional intelligence. As you climb the career ladder, emotional intelligence becomes more and more important. I would tell you, I think emotional intelligence just matters as it relates to relationships and life. People with high EQs make more money, hands down. I have lost count of the number of conversations I've had with senior leaders who we will talk behind the scenes as from a succession planning perspective. We'll talk about somebody who's got great experience, the right education, the right expertise, but from an emotional intelligence perspective, they're falling flat. They don't get the promotion. I think influence or executive presence is another component we don't talk often enough about. People think of executive presence sometimes as how you look. That's one small bit of this. It's how you communicate, but more importantly, it is how you act. Do your words and do your actions and behavior and the results you drive align? Daniel Pink, I've got a quote on here about your time being dedicated to influence, convincing, and persuading. We are all in sales, whether you are, receiving sales incentive or commissions or not. Each one of us is in sales in order to get people in-house to agree to what we want to accomplish, to give us the resources, the time, the people, the money to get things done. It's incredibly important to invest in yourself in this way. When you are closing the deal, be aware of your emotions and manage those. Do not discuss your personal situation. I have had people where they have been laid off for a year plus, and they've had to sell their house. They've had to make major substantial changes. Don't talk about that. Just talk about the value you can deliver in the context of what that employer cares about. You have to be patient. Don't rush negotiation conversations. If you rush them, you will make a mistake, regret it. Ask questions, be very curious. You have to get offers in writing. I will give you an example. I had a colleague when I worked in telecom. We worked together for 12 years. We had 6 different bosses over that course of 12 years. Brenda had negotiated an extra week of vacation. Every time we got a new boss, she had to pull out her old offer letter and show them that outside of what was coded in the HR system in terms of her vacation time, she had an extra week. And so you want to make sure that things are written in offer letters in a way that protect you in case there is staff changes or changes in the people in HR, as well as hiring manager leadership when you're hired. The call to action is research and know your worth early in the process. Recruiters do not want to talk to you unless they have some sense that you guys can get to a meeting place down the road as it relates to compensation. So you have to know what a job is worth in order to have those types of smart conversations with recruiters and hiring managers. Plan, practice, role play, make sure that you're not just winging it when it comes to this kind of stuff, or you will be in deep trouble. And then again, here's my QR code so you can scan it and you can book 15 minutes with me. That 15 minutes does not expire. You can meet with me in the next week. You can meet 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now. I can't imagine any of us will meet 6 years from now, but I have had people reach out to me a year after they've listened to a presentation like this to meet with me for 15 minutes. With that, Chelle, I'll open it up for questions.
Okay, awesome. If you want to end your screen share, I'm going to share my screen. How lucky are we that we had Denise today to talk with all of us? Can I get a hands up and was that helpful for all of you?
Good.
Awesome. Okay, Denise, thank you so much. And that's why we at Colorado Career Connectors, we really want you to decrease that equity pay issue, state what you're worth, and own your voice. And Denise and I have been friends for a few years now. If she can help you with anything, please reach out to her. A few last ideas for you. I'm going to share my screen really quick. We have another meetup coming up with the past head of organizational change and communication from SAP globally. She has lived in over 23 countries, and her name is Nicole Trick-Steinbach. She's going to do a presentation on May 10th about how to build your brave to achieve your dream job. She is a very good friend of mine. She's a blast. She was voted as one of the top speakers for women in tech. We are so fortunate to have her at our next meetup, so please join us. And I'd love to hear from you as well. As the founder of Colorado Career Connectors, I am a career coach. I've been in 20 years in the business, and that's why we bring you people like Denise. Visit my website and sign up for my webinars and join my mailing list. We absolutely send lots of newsletters. We're going to be recording this, and this will be sent out to you with Denise's and my contact information. Speak your value, know your worth, and do everything possible to live abundantly. We do have a couple of other questions, and I'm going to stop, or Denise, we do have a few other questions, and let me ask. Jean wanted to know, just one second. There's a lot of comments on thank you, great feedback, great to have all of you, great session. Actually, Robert is asking, out of a baffling curiosity, how will the Colorado law impact the salary conversation and negotiation? Also, how do you feel about the bold strategies of asking for bonus added to salary and not get a bonus?
Okay, so let's talk about the Colorado Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. It is changing a ton in companies. Companies that don't have their house in order, don't have a pay structure already in place for their jobs, are scrambling. It also requires them to write job descriptions. There's a lot of, they have to post jobs internally prior to tapping somebody on the shoulder to fill a role. What it does for you as employees is it puts you in a place where there is a lot more pay transparency and more visibility to things and opportunities than what you had before. I think it's great in terms of supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion priorities in employers. I will tell you, there are a lot of employers who are really frustrated and angry about it because they're having to do more and they don't find the value add to it. I think they're short-sighted and they don't have an abundance mindset. As it relates, what was the other piece, Chelle? I'm not sure I understood the second part of that.
Yeah, how do you feel about the bold strategy of asking for a bonus added to salary and then not getting a bonus, and then not get a bonus?
So, you know, in a lot of companies that are mid-sized to large, salary plus bonus is the norm. In smaller companies where bonus isn't the norm, you can certainly
Please put yourself on mute if you're not speaking. Thank you.
Thanks. So with smaller companies where they don't typically offer bonus, you can certainly ask for it, but then you might need help designing it. Again, I know how to design bonus programs. I would tell you, it is not unusual in down sectors of the economy to not pay out a bonus. And I'll give you an example. I worked with one gentleman who ran sales compensation, a team of more than 50 people. He said yes to a large employer. And he asked the question when I was interviewing, what was their bonus payout for the last 3 years? And they said, well, we haven't, he didn't ask it, they hadn't paid a bonus for 3 years. So people can talk about targets when it comes to incentives, but actual payouts, you got to ask the right questions.
Later night tonight? Yeah, I did a time change for 2.
Stacy, can you put yourself on mute?
Lately, for whatever reason, they keep putting me on the ticket counter.
Please put yourself on mute.
Or can the host put her on
I'm
mute?
trying to find
The
it.
ticket counter, but I'm not.
Find her.
I'm finding her. I'm trying.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, or Yvette, thanks for putting her on mute. So there, you can ask. I'm gonna say that again because I got put on mute, I think accidentally.
It was accidental, Denise, sorry.
All right, so here, I'm gonna say that again. Most mid-sized to large employers will have base pay and bonus opportunity. If you're at a certain level, you'll also get long-term incentives. For smaller companies, you may only get salary. You may not get a bonus, or it may be a bonus, you know, that's sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. If you end up working for a company where you want them to offer you a bonus, you can certainly ask for it. If they hesitate and they're like, oh, I don't, you know, they need to create a bonus plan, etc. That's why I work on the other side of the fence, is I'm a firm believer in helping employers do the right thing for their employees. So happy to be somebody that I could have a dialogue with you, or somebody in HR, somebody in the firm, to help them create a bonus plan if one isn't offered. But you're always, anytime there's an incentive, there's always the possibility of you not getting paid that incentive if they don't meet their metrics. So that's pretty normal. That's why it's called variable pay, or pay at risk.
My experience 2 years ago, I got my bonus paid out at 100%. The following year, I got laid off.
Alan, it's nice to see you. Yeah, it happens, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's like, take nothing for granted.
Exactly. Put the money away and save it while you can, and that's why I believe in that personal marketing plan. Is you gotta be ready at any moment to have to do a job search, or start your own business, or do a side gig on the side so you got something to fall back on.
Okay, we're at 1:03. Denise, thank you so much. This was awesome.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. please let Denise or me know how we can help you. We wish you nothing but the best, an abundant career and positive mindset throughout your career search. Thank you so much. Bye, Erin.
Thank you. Thanks, Shelley.
Bye,
Thanks,
Amber.
Denise.
See
you.
you later.
Bye. Thank you for your
Bye.
questions.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks, Denise. Bless you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Marva. It's so nice to see you. Hi, Rosa. Nice
Thank
to see
you,
you.
Denise.
Bye. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Denise, we had a few other questions, but I'll reach back out to that person. I'm going to stop recording this now.
Okay.